Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the real secrets of the summits. We're doing a deep dive into the massive geological and cultural forces that completely define our relationship with the world's highest mountains. We usually look at these towering peaks as just giant rocks waiting to be conquered, but the science, the history, and the profound cultural reverence surrounding them tell a wildly different story. Let me start off with a question that completely flipped my own perspective on mountaineering. What is the absolute highest mountain on Earth that you cannot climb? No way, no how, not because it's too technically difficult and not because the weather is too harsh, but because humans are strictly forbidden from ever setting foot on its summit. Any guesses? Well, this mystery peak stands at a staggering 7,570 meters. That is almost 25,000 feet of pure, untouchable rock and ice. We're going to reveal exactly which mountain this is and why it's totally off limits a little later in this explainer. But to really grasp why we are banned from this peak, we've first got to step back and look at the violent, beautiful science of how a 25,000-foot behemoth even gets there in the first place. So, Section 1, How Mountains Are Born. These giants aren't just sitting there doing nothing. They're actually the result of this incredibly dynamic and active geological engine. The official science term for mountain building is orogeny. And the crucial thing to understand here is that mountains don't just magically pop up out of nowhere. Orogeny happens at convergent plate margins. Basically, that means it kicks off when two of Earth's massive tectonic plates literally smash into each other. Think of it like a slow-motion, planetary-scale car crash that just crumbles the Earth straight up into the sky. Take the Andes, for example. When we look at their tectonic evolution, what's happening is the oceanic plate is actively diving under the continental crust. The sheer friction and pressure from this collision are mind-boggling. It causes the crust above to buckle, fold, and fracture. Those thrust faults represent solid rock being snapped and shoved miles into the air. It is a violent, continuous process that's been raging for millions of years. The mountains we see today are just a snapshot of that battle. And so, the Earth violently pushes these peaks up, creating these insane zones with zero oxygen, freezing temps, and constant avalanches. Naturally, what do we humans do? We look at that incredibly hostile environment and think, yep, I should definitely go stand on top of that. Which brings us to Section 2, the drive to climb. You see, our relationship with altitude has completely shapeshifted over time. Humans have actually been living up high for a remarkably long time. We found evidence of permanent settlements in the Andes at 4,500 meters dating back 12,000 years. And by the 7th century, Lhasa was permanently occupied at over 3,600 meters. But then the 1950s hit, and we saw this massive shift. Extreme mountaineering was born. Conquering 8,000-meter peaks became a sport, a way to test the absolute limits of human endurance. Fast forward to today, and you've got 2,000 to 3,000 people pitching tents to create a literal mini-city at Everest Base Camp during climbing season. We've completely transitioned from sustainable traditional living to this industrialized race to the top of the world. And make no mistake, that race is brutal. Up there, the line between life and death is incredibly tenuous. Back in the early days of extreme climbing, like those famous 1950s expeditions, the suffering was really intensely romanticized. Climbers would come back with horrific frostbite, literally missing fingers and toes, and they became absolute legends. Their injuries were basically seen as badges of honor, a testament to their passion and willingness to step into the absolute unknown. It's a powerful psychological magnet, right? Putting your life on the line to conquer the sheer, immense severity of nature. But there's a flip side. Section 3, Microplastics on Mount Everest. Today, that romanticized conquest has a much darker, very modern consequence. As we funnel thousands of people into the death zone, we're leaving a permanent, toxic mark on the most remote corners of our planet. Researchers recently tested snow and stream water from Mount Everest, and honestly, the results are shocking. They found microplastics, those tiny plastic fragments smaller than 5 millimeters, literally all over the mountain. But here is the craziest data point. The absolute highest concentration of these plastics was found at an astonishing 8,440 meters above sea level. That is just steps away from the summit. And the vast majority of these particles, polyester fibers. This means the highly specialized gear, the insulated tents, the synthetic ropes, and the high-tech clothing designed to keep climbers alive is actively shredding and polluting the mountain as they climb. As the research team pointed out, we desperately need technological advances in our gear to stop this. If we're going to keep exploring these extreme environments, we have to become way better stewards of them. Because right now, our obsession with the summit is literally choking the mountain in a cloud of plastic dust. And it's not just the physical stuff we're leaving behind. We are actually melting the mountain's cement. This is such a fascinating yet totally terrifying geological reality. We all hear about glaciers melting, sure, but way less talked about is the thawing of permafrost. High up in these peaks, water seeps deep down into the cracks of the rock and freezes solid. That ice acts exactly like structural cement, literally gluing the mountain's faces together. But as global temperatures tick upwards, this deep ice thaws out. When you melt the cement, entire massive rock faces become instantly unstable. It leads to catastrophic rockfalls. The mountains are literally falling apart right under our feet. So let's circle back, Section 4, the highest unclimbed peak. This brings us right back to the mystery we teased at the very start of this explainer. What is that massive 7,570-meter giant that humans are completely banned from climbing? Well, meet Gangkhar Puensum. Sitting right on the border of Bhutan and China, it is officially the highest unclimbed mountain in the world. And honestly, it's going to stay that way. Back in 1994, the government of Bhutan prohibited all mountaineering above 6,000 meters. But why? Well, it's out of a profound respect for local spiritual beliefs. In their culture, these towering peaks aren't athletic challenges. They are the sacred homes of protective deities and spirits. So to climb them, to hammer metal pitons into their rock and leave garbage on their summits would be viewed as the ultimate act of desecration. And Gangkhar Puensum is definitely not an isolated case. Take Mount Kailash in Tibet. It sits at 6,638 meters and is considered profoundly sacred by 4 major world religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon. We're talking about billions of people who revere this peak. Every single year, pilgrims travel huge distances just to walk in circles around the base of the mountain as an act of devotion. But actually scaling the peak, setting foot on the top, absolutely forbidden. For a massive chunk of humanity, these mountains simply aren't athletic playgrounds. They are divine, living entities. Which leads us to our final takeaway. Section 5, preserving our sacred peaks. We are finally starting to realize that if we actually want to save these environments, we have to respect how local communities value them. By recognizing what's called their intangible cultural heritage, we can actually protect the physical landscape. For decades, the modern Western approach to mountains has been totally anchored in material value. We see mountains as resources, stuff for tourism, recreation, maybe extraction. But traditional communities, they view them through a non-material lens. They see them as sources of spiritual inspiration, places for sacred rituals, and homes for traditional healing. And what researchers are finding is pretty incredible. This non-material approach is vastly superior for environmental conservation. When a community reveres a mountain as sacred, they just naturally protect its biodiversity. They don't need a government park ranger standing there telling them to do it. A perfect example of this is the concept of Bayul. Up in the high Himalayas, some of the most brutal, freezing, oxygen-deprived environments on Earth are referred to as Bayul. Now, to an outsider, it looks like a harsh, unforgiving wasteland. But through the cultural lens of the local folks living there, these valleys are literally seen as paradise. Tranquil, peaceful places perfectly suited for spiritual growth. And because they view their home as a paradise, they treat it with the absolute utmost respect. They don't overhunt, they don't pollute, and they figure out how to live in complete harmony with this extreme ecosystem. So we're really left with this powerful paradox. We have the technology to conquer almost any peak on this planet today. But as we've seen with the microplastics on Everest and the terrifying thawing of the permafrost, our conquest comes at a devastating price. In our relentless race to the top of the world, is the ultimate achievement actually learning when to stop? Maybe the truest mastery of nature isn't planting a flag on top of Gangkhar Puensum. Maybe, just maybe, true mastery is having the strength, the deep respect, and the wisdom to look at a 7,570-meter giant and simply leave it alone. That's going to do it for this explainer. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.